during or
Yes, they will
okay.
be able to. They can raise hands and ask questions.
All right. Since I probably won't notice.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We're just going to wait a few more moments as people start to trickle in, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, we're watching a slideshow of some beautiful architectural photography.
That's not really architecture.
Looks delicious either way.
It was. I remember eating that afterwards.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get us kicked off, and then we'll have people join us as they can. But hi, everyone, and welcome to the Architectural Photography Create Design Magazine Worthy Photos. We're so glad you're here with us today. A few quick notes before we dive in. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section. We'll try to answer as many as we can before the end. This session is being recorded, and it will be available on demand in the attendee portal within 12 hours of this talk ending. Thanks again for joining us, and we're excited to get started. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to Adam Gibson, our amazing speaker, who is an architectural photographer at Adam Gibson Design. So I'll kick it off to you.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'm really happy to be part of Indie Design Week. Just think it's such a cool concept. Oh, and that is not architecture on the screen. I will move over to introducing myself. I am an architectural photographer. I'm also an architectural designer, and that's a little bit unusual. Most of the time, people who become architectural photographers begin as real estate photographers, which is considerably different, and I will get into a little bit of the differences as we go on. But I put this QR code up here, and I'll also show it at the end. If you have a need to get in touch with me, that has all my contact info and social, and I think everything about me is up there. So if you're not whipping your phone out now and you want to do it at the end, please do. I always like to be helpful, and sometimes people have questions, and I'm going to go over some technical stuff. So if you want to bail when that happens, you will not offend me. It happens sometimes, and we'll get started. I want to let everyone know that this will take about an hour, and I will be happy to take questions. And I think we'll have a Q&A, a dedicated Q&A at some point as well. But I've been doing this for about 20 years and obviously love it. I'm passionate about it. And I'm just going to get started with some of the things that I like in architectural photography. And as I mean, architectural photography, sometimes people say, what is that? And I say, yeah, it's just what it sounds like. It's photographs of architecture. But there's so many different kinds of architecture: interior, exterior, aerial, shooting from the bottom up, shooting interior kitchens or just for interior designers. I happen to shoot for magazines. Uh, I shoot for magazines, designers, builders, and architects. So yeah, a lot of architects. So we're just going to start with some things I like about some of the photos. I happen to really be a fan of this architect who did this kitchen and hired me to come in and shoot the whole house. And what I like about this kitchen in particular is I didn't have to do anything. I just set up some lights and all the staging was done. And what I mean by that, there's very little staging. There are, let's see, I guess I can use a little pen here. You've got a group here, a group here, and a group here. Basically, that's it. That's all the staging. Now, one thing that I will point out is this faucet kind of interrupts the flow of the window. That's called a point of tangency. And it kind of just misses it, but it is there nonetheless. Let's keep moving on. I have a lot of photos to show. So another one, I like this designer a lot. Again, very simple staging, not a lot there. We will talk about composition, of course, but I'm just starting with the easy stuff. Same here. This was important to get the back here. That's called a stand desk, and it had the little mail slots, and it's actually taller than the other cabinets. It was important that that gets included in this shot. So this is a pretty wide shot. A lot of times we won't shoot this wide for architecture, but because we wanted to get the whole deal, we shot wide. Of course, we always have plenty of crop shots as well. Another one, I like the simplicity of this. We've got groupings, not much, but interestingly it's this part here. It's what's called balance, and it's completely different than symmetry. There's just some balance on either side of that cooktop just by those two props. So it really makes it effective and it doesn't distract. So my main goal as an architectural photographer is to capture the vision of whoever created the space. And that is of paramount importance. It doesn't matter what I think, it matters that their vision gets portrayed, and that's why people hire me. So important. All right, so here's a little technical thing. Shooting this interior, but the exterior was beautiful too because it's looking out on this golf course. So what are you going to do when you're shooting a maybe kind of brightly lit interior, but a really brightly sunlit day outside? You have to compensate for the exposures inside and outside. So we had to blend these photos together. So because we wanted to capture the outside. And if we hadn't done that, if we had just shot for the inside, everything outside those windows would just be white. That's white in digital photography is just lack of data. There'd be nothing there. So we had to make sure we did that. Here, all right, I like this composition, but I see something that I really dislike. And I don't remember the reason, this is a while ago, but if you look over here, this is a big distraction. You have this easel that kind of looks like the faucet, which is probably 20 feet in front of it. It's just distracting. So this became an unusable image, unusable for its purposes anyway. All right, going to outside. Framing a photo can be really, really effective. Like one of the objectives in photography is the photographer gets to control where the viewer's eye goes, or we try to. So there are many methods to do that. Leading lines, framing, darkening corners, like Ansel Adams was famous for that. Well, in this case, just we have a branch that frames the house. So your eye is just naturally drawn to the house. And this architect was really happy with this house. It's an old farmhouse that got added to twice. And that's what he wanted to portray. In this case, same thing. I used some branches to portray this courthouse because it's an old house and I want it to be kind of grungy and a little bit dark, or not dark, but contrasty. So that's why I went with black and white with this one. I love shooting black and white. Speaking of what you want your eye to be drawn to, the eye is obviously drawn to the house, but the dock is the leading line. So we use the dock, stood at the end of the dock, and the viewer's eye naturally just travels down to whatever's at the end of the leading line. And it worked out pretty well. In fact, I printed an 8-foot version of this because I liked it. Got leading lines here too, even though it's just a wine room, the rug is acting as a leading line. You might not know it, but your eye is drawn to the end of it, and then you kind of move up and you see the painting, and then the wine. It's kind of just an after effect. Even this is leading lines. The leading lines in this case are the control joints in the driveway. Right in the center of the camera, you have these two lines. I mean, there are other ones, but these two lines kind of lead you to the front porch. And what this architect was so proud of was his proportions, the porch against the house. I don't know how many iterations he did. He said a lot. And I think what he achieved was great. I mean, this is a really pleasing shot. It's a pleasing house. But the leading lines kind of help bring your eye right to the center. Also, this is leading lines. This was for a magazine cover. And I was with the editor shooting this. I didn't understand why this would be a compelling shot, but he thought it would be, and he thought it would be a good cover shot. One of the things we had to do was light this artwork. And it was very dark. I could not get lights on it. So we had to put some lights out here. Oh, you can't see where I'm pointing. Out here is a window. So we put lights out in the garden, in the mud, got very muddy, but we were able to light this. And then the leading line is just basically the hallway, brings you down to the end of the hallway. So you have to know if you're going to shoot for magazines or publications where there are other elements going on your page, you have to really, it's best to know what is going to happen with your shot if you can. I knew this was going to be a cover, and so the editor did not mess up the photo. I hate to say mess up. I mean, it's their magazine. I'm just a lowly photographer. But I want to make sure that what I'm shooting gets recognized in the way it should. So I knew it would. And in this case, there's also a magazine. I knew it would be a cover. So I left plenty of space in the mast, where the mast would go. That's the title of the magazine. So this whole area is pretty empty. And I keep learning how to use this eraser. I knew this magazine was going to do a lot of content. And so this is what they did. But they because we had a little planning, I mean, I knew there was going to be text over this, but it really does not mess up the image badly. Now, in this one, we were really happy with the fireplace design. It's very cool. But then you have this eyesore of a TV on top of it. And like, what are you going to do? It looks trashy. So a little bit of Photoshop. You see over on the left, there's that yellow painting by, I think that's Kyle Ragsdale. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's a Kyle piece. Anyway, I'm just going to Photoshop that where the TV is. And then, yeah, it's not a great image, but you're not at least distracted by the TV. So if you have something that's just a pure distraction, get rid of it, because the goal of architectural photography is to portray the designer's vision. And that a lot of times means removing things from a scene. Here, well, first of all, this shot would never be used for anything, but this is the wide shot of this area that we were probably going to get 6 different, or maybe even 7 vignettes from this area because it's so big. But the first thing we have to do is get rid of the distractions. And that ceiling, we call that in design parlance, that's ceiling acne. And we want to get rid of the ceiling acne, wall acne, any acne. We just don't want acne. We're in a digital age here. So first thing we do, get rid of it. So there you see the majority of that crap is gone. So those distractions are gone. Left enough to let the viewer know, yes, the architect did put lights in the room, just not that many, and speakers and other skylights and things like that. But it's still not an image that would really be useful for architecture. It's more of like a real estate image, because with real estate, you of course want to show things as wide and big as possible. So don't be afraid to crop. This is what we ended up with. Now we could crop even more and have just 1/3 of this image. It would still be pretty effective. The other thing is, you don't have to shoot the whole room. So in this case, we shot obviously just a little section of this kitchen. And the goal here was to show the modernism, the right angles, but also show that it leads out to a beautiful yard. And then, of course, we would include images of the whole space. Actually, those shots were about 10 years apart, too. Again, same thing. This, to me, is a pretty powerful image. And why? Because you have in the foreground this right angle, very modernist, really beautiful color of blue. At least on my computer, it's a beautiful color of blue. I don't know what your monitors look like. It's another thing we'll talk about. But it's simple. You know, it just tells the story of this. All right, there's a pretty cool kitchen. I did a lot of kitchens in this presentation, even though we shoot all kinds of things. Kitchens are just easy for people to identify with. But then there's the whole room. And to me, it's not that powerful. It just looks like a nice kitchen. But this, that's a cool shot. In this one, staging, there's one prop. It's that fish bowl. And in fact, hate to say it, that fish died 10 minutes after this shot. The fish was brought in as a prop and graced us by looking at the camera when we shot, and then died. So boo-hoo for the fish, but he made for a nice shot. Don't be afraid of getting low. Don't be afraid of getting high. Do something creative. And in this case, this designer was very happy with her island and asked, just wanted to make sure I got the island. Now, if I had a little more time, I probably would have fixed what looks like next to the microwave is a trash compactor. And I probably would have photoshopped some of the distractions out. But she wanted to show that. So this is how it worked. And be creative. Always be creative. I mean, that's a given. I guess if you're on this thing, you're already probably a creative. This architect was really happy with this cottage, and this is a brand new build, and he loved the brick floor, which was repurposed brick, but he also loved the railing system. So, I mean, I shot lots of pictures of the railing, and they just looked like a railing to me. But getting through, every single baluster had these little triangles, so we just shot through one and got to show the artistry of his design. And then, of course, the practicality of the floor that he was so proud of. Yeah, moving along pretty quickly. Here's one that's interesting. If you'll notice, most of the shots we've looked at so far are shot at an angle. And the reason for that is to show the three-dimensionality of whatever the room is, the space, the building, whatever it is. It's rare that I shoot straight on like this, although it's becoming more and more popular, and magazines are actually more interested in this kind of shot now than they used to be. But if you're going to shoot straight on, you have got to be dead center and dead level. And I don't mean just dead level this way, but this way too. So level. If I had moved an inch, well, actually I moved many inches because I had to get this camera just in the right spot. The spaces, I guess I can draw this. These spaces have to be equidistant. So the bottoms of these vanities have to be equidistant to the bottom of my frame. Same thing on the top. There is, I didn't realize how well this worked. The ceiling, it's equidistant from the top of the frame. And this is even more important. This is, all right, so this one, the converging vertical, or let's call them verticals, this is critical. You will not see an architectural photo that doesn't have a perfectly straight vertical line. all the vertical lines should be vertical if they're meant to be vertical. And the reason for that is that's what our eye sees. I can tilt my head and you beautiful people still look the same. Camera doesn't see it. Camera doesn't have brains like we do. So you really have to make sure if you're shooting straight on that you are dead center. And then of course, because I was dead center in this case, and there was a mirror there, I just spent an extra half hour removing the camera from the mirror in Photoshop. That's tedious, but sometimes it's just necessary. Same here, straight on shot. Those grout lines, if just a half an inch of moving the camera in those grout lines would not look right on the floor. The grout lines on the floor here, and of course the verticals. And then you have this ceiling line. I will draw it again. That ceiling line has to be exactly the same distance from the top of the tile to the top of the frame. If it's not, you'll see it immediately and you'll drive someone crazy. It would drive me crazy. All right, here's one I didn't shoot. This is not my photo. It was my design, probably a good 15 years ago. And I was happy with the design of this bar. I designed the bar. Well, I guess I designed the whole space. And the builder brought in a photographer who I would consider more of a real estate photographer. And the reason I say that is it's really wide. All the lights are on, which I almost never do. And you rarely see all the lights on in an architectural shot. Depends on the image, depends on the goal, but typically they're off and the photographer brings his own lights or her lights. But the eye, well, most people's concept is the eye is drawn to the brightest part of an image, which isn't actually true. Your eye is drawn to the point of most contrast in an image. Well, in this case, it's the TV. So the first thing I thought was, why is the TV on? That's all I see is the TV. And then I realized, all right, you have all this dead space up here, or we call that white space. And then it's really wide. So all I did was I wanted to fill in some of that blank area, crop it, and get rid of the TV. So this is what I came up with. I mean, I just pasted this painting in there in Photoshop. I put a little shadow there, so at least it looks real. Got rid of the wall acne that was up here, and then darkened the TV. I can't turn off these lights, but they're not so distracting now. So that was a pretty simple thing. And now going to your eyes drawn to the brightest spot. Of course, this is just an example I like to use, but yeah, your eye is drawn to the brightest spot because there's only one bright spot. But if you look at this one, your eye is drawn to the darkest spot because it's the point of most contrast. So why not use a real estate photographer if you're now, first of all, I should say I speak around our continent. Actually, no, I don't go to Mexico for this to teach, but I teach architectural photography to lots of groups around North America other than Mexico. And nothing against Mexico. I happen to love that place. And I often get asked by designers, why would I pay you $3,000 or whatever it costs? It's usually about $3,000 a day. Why would I pay you when I can have my architecture guy do it for a couple $100? And I say, you shouldn't. You should hire the architectural photographer. I mean, you should hire the real estate photographer if money is the goal. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And I have a buddy who's a real estate photographer. He can shoot 4 to 7 houses, whole houses in a day, where I'm often can't shoot more than one in a day. I mean, I never shoot more than one in a day, but can't imagine shooting more than one. Sometimes one house takes 2 or 3 days. That's why it's more expensive, because of the time. And of course, there's quite a bit of additional equipment cost when you really get into architecture. But anyway, why do we do this? Oh, I guess I shouldn't have gone so quickly. What is the goal of a real estate photographer? It's to sell real estate, right? It's an excellent, noble goal. It's needed, but they cost less and they take less time. That's really what I wanted to say. And architectural photographer, It's artistic. We're going to usually employ tighter angles. We're going to tell a story of a space considerably differently. Usually it's meant for very long-term archival purposes or publishing. Big difference. Real estate, it's a one-time thing. We could maybe do some images in a half day if it's a room or two, but usually it's going to be more than that. One image might cost, one of my images might cost more than an entire house for a real estate photographer. And it's because I will have spent all that time. And not just me, I'm saying that this is pretty much industry standard. And our goal is to portray somebody's vision, artistic vision, design vision, not to sell property. So those are the biggest difference. Now, if you are going to hire someone, these are some pretty important caveats. First of all, they should have, and I'm talking as if you're hiring an architectural photographer, not as if you want to become one. But, and I don't know who's on this webinar. This is a little different audience than I'm used to. But if you are hiring someone, they should have lots of amazing photography that represents the kind of work you do. Okay. Also, almost all photographers will grant you usage license to show their work, because it doesn't matter how much time you spent in a space, the photographer owns the intellectual property. That image is not yours, it's theirs. So they license it to you to use. And some photographers will just grant you a license in perpetuity to use it for whatever you want. Most won't. And you have to arrange that up front. Like, where do you think you'll use the photos? Is it just your website? Maybe that'll be granted in perpetuity. But what if you have done something and a manufacturer sees it, a manufacturer that you used on your project, and they want to use the photo? You can't give it to them because it's not yours. So they have to contact the photographer, who may or may not grant them license to use the photo. They may charge them, they may not. But you want to know that up front. That's the point. Thirdly, they should get you. They should understand your vision. I don't have them in this presentation, but when I first started in design a gazillion years ago, I hired some amazing photographers. I mean, these people were off the charts, top of the line in the city I lived in, which happened to be Nashville, Tennessee. Well, turns out they really hadn't done much architecture. They'd done real estate, lots of portraits, weddings, all kinds of great things. And they were amazing at those fields, not architecture. And that's really why I got into it, because I realized, well, I'm paying all this money and I am not getting the goods that I really hoped for. So then I started, this is also a gazillion years ago, started taking classes and got a photography guru and just went all out trying to educate myself. And now I've been practicing it for years and years. Okay, don't let them stage. Most photographers don't understand how to stage. Now they'll understand where something in a frame will relate to other things in the frame. That's key. So definitely ask for their advice and their opinion. But I would bring in someone who stages for photography if it's an important shot. And there are quite a few people in this town who do that, and or bring in an interior designer who's done a lot of photography work. Just don't let the photographer do it, because chances are they're not going to get your vision. And then also, lastly, if you're going to hire someone, make sure, if it's important to you, if you're going to be on the shoot on the site during the shoot, that you want to see the images as they go, and not on the back of their camera, but on a laptop or a big iPad or whatever, if that's important to you. And it would be to me, and that's how I do it. I want people to see my shots before I leave the site, because I don't want to go back, and I want them to love it. I mean, we want people to love what we do. So those are the caveats if you're gonna hire someone. And now we're gonna go to this. If you get one item from this little presentation, make it this one. Use some sort of stability advice when you're shooting. Don't try to handhold. And the reason is because of the nature of this of the artistry of doing architectural photography, which means you want to see detail usually from the front, the foreground, all the way to the background. Everything should be in focus. And in order to do that, you have to have a very small aperture most of the time. I mean, there are other ways you can achieve this. They all require a stability device. So get a tripod, a really sturdy, good tripod that'll last you the rest of your life. Okay, so that's one thing. Shooting raw, which is basically shoot, or not basically, essentially, or precisely, shooting raw is using a file system that does not destroy any of the data. All cameras have this ability right now. Ooh, first fly of the season in my studio. So for instance, let's go to the next one. These are some of the things you can do when you shoot raw, and it's because you're retaining all the data in the file. When you look on your screen at a raw image, it's not going to look any different than a JPEG. And that's not the point. The point is that you have data that you can extract from the file meaning photo. You can do all these things like adjust white balance, but what you see on a computer screen is usually a JPEG. So it's just compressing everything down to 256 levels of brightness. And you can see what a raw file, this is an old slide. It might be more than that now, I'm not sure. So you really want to keep that data. Even some phones can shoot in RAW. I think my new phone shoots in RAW. Takes a lot of space though. This is something I usually ask when I'm presenting to a bunch of designers. I'm like, anyone know what dynamic range is? Now, I don't let photographers answer because every photographer knows what dynamic range is. But since I can't see you guys, I'm just going to tell you, this is essentially what it is. And what's interesting about that is that our brains, we have tremendous dynamic range compared to a camera. Like the highest end camera. All right, so you see how I have, I'm converting dynamic range to stops because stops is what how cameras are measured in dynamic range. So if our dynamic range and for our eyesight is 24 stops, so we can see the bottom being the shadows, top being the highlights. You know, a camera might only see this much. So you have to find a way to compensate for that. And usually you're going to be blending the photos together. This is just another diagram of the same thing that I just said. Here's kind of a decent example of it. The image on the right is what we would see if we looked at this ocean with the sun setting. We'd basically see the whole thing. But a camera is not going to see that. A camera is going to be overwhelmed because there's so much dynamic range. You got the sun, as bright as you can get, and then dark shadows that are created because of the shadows from the sun. So if the one on the left is the camera exposing for the bright part, and then the one in the middle is exposing for the dark part. So what we have to do is figure out a way, if we're going to have that kind of dynamic range in an image, figure out how we can blend them together. Well, the good news is software does it for you. Not every kind, but basically, and the image that I have up on the screen achieved that without me doing any tweaks. And that's why I have this one up, because it was so textbook easy. So at the top image, I expose for the darkest part of the scene, which is the shadow below the counter. And then in the lower, I exposed for the brightest, which was the sky in the backyard, which is actually, and the reason we even did this, because there's a beautiful lake behind there. So then I told the computer, in this case, it may have been Photoshop, it may have been Lightroom, and every editing software is capable of this. I said, blend them together, and it gave me this. Now, of course, I cropped it and did a few other things, but I didn't have to blend the exposures. It actually did it for me. It's not always that easy, and there are many ways to achieve this, but I'm telling you that's the easiest. So don't be afraid if you have to bracket. And that's what bracketing is. You're bracketing for shadows, maybe you do middles, maybe you do highs. I mean, a lot of times I'll do 7 or 9 brackets, and blend them together. But what I just showed you, that was 2, and it worked. It's not always that easy though. All right, converging verticals. I'll let you read this, but basically a converging vertical is that a vertical line in an image will at some point theoretically converge. So you have 2 things, like your camera's tilted a little forward. Just say it's just tilted a little bit forward. That means anything that's vertical will not appear vertical. And at some point, in theory, way up in the sky or way down in hell, they converge. That's a converging vertical. You will never see a converging vertical in an architectural magazine. So we have to figure out how to do that. The easiest, well, the way you really have to do it without getting into a lot of technical stuff is keep your camera level. That's it. In this case, the one on the right is perfectly level, but it's not just right. That green line shows that it's level front to back. It also has to be level side to side. So what do architectural shooters use to keep something vertical? But you might have to be shooting way up or way down at something. Like, how do we do that? We use specialized lenses called shift lenses. And there's an example, well, 2 examples. So what's cool about these lenses is that they can shift up and down. They can shift side to side. They also tilt. And that, I'm not going to get into the tilt function. That's pretty cool. But for these purposes, we'll just use the tilt function. So what does that mean? So if you have a camera and you have a lens, do it this way. The lens shifts up and down or sideways, but the camera doesn't move. That means if you shoot, let's say we're shooting a really tall image, and what I want to shoot is up here, what I want to capture, but I don't want to point my camera up. But if I shift that lens up, it's remarkable how high up in the frame it goes. And I also maybe could get the whole thing, but because I'm not moving the camera body, I could do 5 images without moving the camera body, just the lens, and stitch them together in whatever software you use, and it'll be seamless. And it's because, remember, lenses are round, so there's barrel distortion. At some point, there's going to be distortion, especially the further you get to the outside edges. But you won't have that if you're using a shift lens. And I'm just going to show you an example. All right, so this is just something I got off the web. I thought it was perfectly described. You got converging verticals. Where are they? Everywhere there's vertical. That's not vertical. This is not vertical. So we need to do something to get rid of that. So in the next slide, the guy just used the shift lens. Converging verticals are gone. And that was really easy. And it actually is that easy if once you learn how to use the gear. Now, everything's manual, there's no automatic, like you do have to learn photography, but I'm assuming you're already into photography if you're listening to me here. So what do you do if you can't, if you don't have a shift lens? Get in the center of whatever it is you're shooting. So in this case, actually in this case, it was a drone, but it could have been a 15-foot ladder too, just getting on top of the ladder. And so there are no converging verticals because the camera is just dead level. And it's because we got in the center of the building. All right, I won't harp on that. I probably harp on it again later. I just wanted to give some options on what you choose to shoot when you're doing something like this. I know I keep showing kitchens, they're just easy and they're relatable, but where do you want to shoot, wide or do you want to shoot tight? Do both. There are no rules, but what you're trying to do is portray the vision of the designer. I was the designer in this case. This is going back some years. I didn't think that was a very compelling image. So I just moved up and shot it tighter. I thought that was, it tells a better story. All right, I know what I wanted to say about this. This isn't really a great image, but if you are or know someone who's going to enter a contest that's sponsored by a manufacturer, which happens a lot. Manufacturers love doing photo contests because they're getting free publicity and they're showing usually pretty cool imagery. So make sure you get the logo, right? So this is for Viking, obviously made sure we got the Viking logo. This one's, you can tell. And I actually like this image. I just like how simple it is. And that Miele coffee maker is the best coffee maker. That one right there. I love it. So anyway, I had to make sure the logo was clear. I guess I thought I had more of those, but I don't. All right, here, this is shot. This was 14 years ago, I believe. And I was not the photographer. I was the designer in this case. And one of the local magazines brought in a photographer. And I had wished that I had moved or gotten him to move the camera a foot or two to the right, because there's a glass railing there and I wanted the railing to be in the shot. And the magazine was like, we just want the stairs. We don't care about the railing. So fast forward 12 years, the homeowners let me come back and reshoot. They had changed the floor, but I got the glass railing and I was happy about that. Another thing is proportions. This is a pretty big room, really, really big hearth and chimney. And I don't think, and those windows are massive. I don't think that without seeing something to scale it, so you'd know just how big it is, and we did that by putting a person in there, you would know how big it is. And I want to make sure that we do address that. I'm not happy with everything about this image. Like there's a lot of reflection from probably from our studio flashes. Not happy about that. This was also quite a long time ago, but you get the idea. Proportions, important. This is called what we call the pullback shot. So it's not the actual shot. It's what the camera was seeing when we stitched 3 or 5 different things together, and it's super wide and not a usable image. But I was just trying to figure out, like, all right, how am I going to use this for this magazine? And I got together with the editor and I showed him my final edit, and he looks at it, he's like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Where is the point of focus? I don't understand. This isn't something I would want to put in my magazine because it's just a big space, but there's no definition. So he said, just crop out part of it and just give me that. And that's a usable. So what we did, and it worked out. Also, I should point out, all the ceiling acne, we tried to crop or get rid of it. So it's less distracting too. Okay, I said you'll perfect your craft by knowing the technical. It wasn't exactly, but knowing the technical enables you to use your creativity. All right, so the next thing is your next best friend. The first one was what? Tripod or stability device. Next one is the circular polarizer. And this is a very inexpensive thing you attach to the front of your lens. If you're using a wide lens, there are other methods. You won't be able to screw it on, but there are ways to use a polarizer, and almost every single architectural photographer is going to use a polarizer sometime or another in each shot. Here's an example of what they do. The image on the left, exactly the same as the image on the right. The only difference is the polarizer was polarizing that reflection. And the reflection was a distraction and made it so the image isn't usable. Really simple. It's just turning the thing till you get it right. Now, ideally, to be most effective, you're shooting at a 30-degree angle. 30-degree angle gives you the most bang for the buck with the polarizer. And I actually happened to find this image this morning on the internet where I could see someone used a polarizer. I don't know who shot this or where, got to take my name off that, where this was. Like, I would never design something like this. But the point is, you see the reflection on the countertop right here? That's because the polarizer that was used was very effective at this reflection, because that is about a 30-degree angle from, I can tell just from looking at the image, the camera was probably about 5 feet off the ground, probably about 20 feet away from the door, 25 maybe. It got rid of the reflection, but the angle was different because this counter is 3 feet taller. Didn't work on the counter. So there are many ways you can get around that. If it's important to you, you could take multiple exposures and just blend the upper one or blend the ones that work in. And the way you do that is you turn the polarizer until it's effective on the countertop, would not be so effective on the floor. Pick and choose or blend them together. I want to say any questions, but are there any questions? I don't even know how to ask about it if there are questions. All right, we're going to go on to more technical stuff. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this is what's called the exposure triangle. And every photographer knows it by heart. It's actually really simple once you get a grasp on it. And if you aren't a photographer and want to understand your camera, go like to the Indianapolis Art Center and take a photography class. Anything. I mean, there's so many ways to learn this, or YouTube or whatever, but many years ago, that's what I did. I started going to classes and I'm like, oh, that's how that works. That's pretty cool to know. So the exposure triangle is shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And I'll briefly go over that. Aperture, less light is hitting the sensor, right? So aperture is how big or small the opening is in the lens. Because that light that comes through that aperture is hitting a sensor at the back of the camera, what used to be film. Well, in order to have a properly exposed image, the exact right amount of light has to hit the sensor. So if the opening, the aperture is very big, the shutter can be opened quick. Like if you were shooting sports, you're going to freeze the action. Well, the smaller the shutter or aperture, the less light, of course. That means the shutter has to be open longer. So, I guess you can just read that. This is why you need a stability device when you're shooting architecture or anything. Didn't realize I left this up here. Anything that requires a significant depth of field. Depth of field meaning the subject is in focus and everything behind it is in focus as well. And there are other methods. You can focus stack, where you focus on incrementally as you go back in the photo and then blend them together in Photoshop. And we have to do that sometimes, but why do that if you can get it all in one shot? I mean, sometimes it's not possible, but sometimes it is. So ISO, that is the sensitivity of a camera. And a lot of people will say, I'll just boost the ISO. That way I can have a small small aperture and a quick shutter speed so I can handhold. Okay, you maybe could do that, but you're going to create noise, which is grain. That's not used. That makes things pretty ugly. I mean, nowadays there are a lot of ways to get rid of noise, but it won't ever be as good as it could be if it never had noise. And number two, you're losing dynamic range when you boost your ISO. So, and there are other reasons too. And there are reasons not to use a very small aperture as well, because you might be creating some diffraction, which I won't get into right now. Anyway, here's an example of high ISO versus low. So I would typically recommend shooting at base ISO if you can, base meaning the lowest your camera goes before going into the extra low. And this is why. Now, another thing is white balance. White balance in a camera is, well, first of all, I guess you should know that a gray card, well, cameras actually don't see color. They see black and white. They see levels of light, of gray. So 18% gray is pretty standard for photographers. Some argue you can go as low as 12. Some argue you can go as high as 22. 18 is pretty standard. So when you're shooting an image, you'll want to put something that's 18% gray in the shot. And then once you take that picture, remove it and go on about your business until you change the lighting scenario. So that big rectangle by the flowers is a gray card, and it can be any size. You simply take a little eyedropper that's in your photo editing software that every bit of software has, and put the eyedropper on the gray part, and it will change the color. And I'm going to show you how. So this is a very orangey amber image because the white balance was set incorrectly. Use that little eyedropper, and this is really what the room's supposed to look like. So you got, that's correct white balance. This is incorrect white balance. The objective, remember, we're capturing someone's vision. The colors have to be dead on. There are other ways to do this too. I mean, more complex, like color checkers, where you're using 24 or 48 colors that the software will match. And I do that sometimes, but 90, probably 6% of the colors will be corrected by using just a gray card. In fact, my my business cards were gray, but they weren't the right color gray. So I'm like, I want business cards that are actually the right gray. Well, it turns out there is no right gray. So I had a really gracious printer who said, print me a bunch of grays on this paper with this ink, with this sheen. And I took a gray card. That's me with the gray card, and found the one that most matched the gray card. And that's what my new business cards are. Okay, we're wrapping up here because I know I assume there are going to be some questions, but you got to calibrate your monitor because no two monitors look the same. They don't come out of the box the same. They never are. Those three items are the most popular, and it's just a piece of hardware that you attach to your screen for 5 minutes. It runs through the calibration, and then you have a calibrated monitor. It's that simple. I have had clients who complain that the images are too amber, too blue. They've tried it on multiple monitors. I say, well, why don't you come into my studio? And because that's terrible, I want you to love your stuff. So come into the studio and we'll edit together right in front of you till it's exactly the color it's supposed to be. They come in, this just happened recently. Come in, they look at my monitor and go, no, it looks great now. What'd you do? And I said, nothing. My monitor's calibrated. This is really what it looks like. So she went out and bought a little calibrating thing, and now her images look like mine. So something to keep in mind. All right, I am wrapping up. I just wanted to point out a few little things. Like I shot this at dawn from the water level, sea level, and you can see how the buildings, they kind of look like they're tilting back and in to the center of the frame. And I was disappointed with that. So that night, or the next night, I don't remember exactly, I went to the top of a mid-rise building, right? Same place from the same area. I just went up high so I could get in the center of those tall buildings. I didn't have a shift lens with me. This was in Shanghai. I got this, and all the converging verticals are gone. Plus, it's cool as hell. Just excuse me, seeing all the lights. That building, or this building, was actually, it's the tallest building in the hemisphere. It wasn't complete then, but it's really way up there, lost in the clouds. So I was able to do that without a shift lens, just by putting my camera at the right height. Same here. This is in Bilbao, Spain. It's the Guggenheim. I call it Guggenheim in gold because it's actually a silver building, but it was a sunset, so I got all this gold. Same thing. I did use a shift lens on this because I was at water level or river level, whatever that is there. And then same here. This was stitched together. Obviously, it's New York. I was at dinner in New Jersey. I saw where you were. I had my gear, and I said, I'll be back in time for dessert, and got this shot. All right, that is my presentation. If you are interested in, or just need help or want advice, and you know what free advice is worth? Nothing, but you can give it a shot. Just use that QR code. That has all my information. It also has the social stuff, and I will be happy to answer any questions as long as I can. So where is our host to see if there are any questions? There you
I
are.
do not currently have any questions in the chat box, but if you guys have any questions for
I must have
our
been really
amazing
thorough then.
speaker, go ahead and throw them in that chat box or in the Q&A, whichever works for you. I'm monitoring them both.
And what timing? I have 6 minutes left.
Yes.
That's good.
6 minutes left.
Maybe I shouldn't have put up the QR code. Now I'm going to get emails.
Like you said, free advice.
Yeah. Well, if there aren't any, I just want to wish everyone a super happy Indie Design Week. And I'm happy to have been one of the ones to help kick it off this year.
Thank you. Well, that I guess is a wrap on today's session. And we wanted to say thank you for joining us, to both you, Adam, as well as all of you. Don't forget that this full recording will be available on demand within the attendee portal within the next 12 hours. If you have any questions or want to keep the conversation going, you do have the information for Adam Gibson here in the QR code, and you can also find it in the attendee portal. You can feel free to stay connected with Indie Design Week on our social and through our community Slack as well. And we are looking forward to seeing you all throughout the week at other events. If you can join us. So again, enjoy the rest of Indie Design Week, and thanks for joining us. Thank you, Adam. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.